Good morning. Good Monday morning. Welcome to the WERA Hot Topics about the Washington State Dyslexia Council. We are very excited to present a great panel of people with different roles in the education system to talk about this work with you over the next hour. My name is Nasue Nishida. Let me move these slides here. My name is Nasue Nishida, and I am going to be the moderator for this conversation, although these folks need no moderation, except maybe time checks. So I am happy to be with you to do that, and I'm also a WERA board member, and then on your screen you can see our other panelists. We are going to do a quick introduction of they're going to do a quick introduction of themselves, and if you would kindly, if you have access to the chat, provide your own introduction to everyone else, who you are, what your day job is, your district or organization. You can find the chat box in the right side, or it shows up on my screen on the right side panel. There's a little menu and you'll see a chat. You should be able to enter your message into that. A couple of things as you're doing that before we get started, some little quick housekeeping for this webinar. If possible, and if you know how, if you could keep yourself on mute for the entire webinar. We do have a long list of registrants for this webinar, and just to keep it nice and tight and clean, we will be taking questions in the chat, but we will not be unmuting people to ask specific questions. So please use the chat function to do that, would be great. And please keep yourself muted. We are going to record this webinar and it will be available to everyone after the hour. You can also rewatch. This will be very entertaining. You can rewatch this webinar, and it will also be available to any people who aren't able to join us today. All right, let's do quick introductions. Liz, you're up first.
Oh, hi, I'm Liz Coon. I am an academic intervention teacher at West Woodland Elementary in Seattle Public Schools.
Hi, I'm Molly Branson-Thayer. I am the Deputy Director of the Cultivate Learning Research Center at the University of Washington.
Good morning. My name is Aira Jackson. I am the Director of English Language Arts and Literacy here at the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction.
All right. A quick overview of our hour. The panelists will be addressing several things, and we encourage you again to type in your questions into the chat, and we will certainly look forward to answering those. The panelists will be talking about the early screeners based on the dyslexia law and more specifics about the background of that law and the council. You will be getting perspectives from two specific roles in the field, one from a higher education faculty, Molly, will be talking about University of Washington's work and her work as a council member. And then Liz will be bringing the perspective of what this looks like on the ground. She is an intervention teacher in the Seattle Public Schools. So you'll be getting a great kind of nice smattering of different roles and perspectives about the work of the council and the work moving forward. And again, we encourage you to either wait till the end to ask your questions or keep them going in the chat and we will address them as they go. All right, Aira, you are on.
All right, thank you, Nasue. So as for all of you starting, I always like to kind of give an overview of the law so we know what were the expectations put forth by our legislature and where we are operating from as a state agency. So and Gross Substitute Bill 6162, the early screening of dyslexia, did a couple of different things. It defined dyslexia. It provided expectations of what school districts will need to do. It also defined what skills would be screened. It also
screenshot as we go.
Okay. It also would also provided us with the formation of the Dyslexia Council. Good. I'm going to ask if everybody could mute themselves because we're getting some feedback. Thank you. It also created the Dyslexia Advisory Council and also laid out what they expected the Dyslexia Advisory Council to do. And then it also gave some expectations of what OSPI, the agency I work with, would do with the Dyslexia Advisory Council. So first and foremost, let's all, just as I like to say, calibrate over what is dyslexia. It is a specific learning disorder that is neurological in order and characterized by unexpected difficulties with accurate or fluent word recognition and poor spelling and decoding abilities that are not consistent with a person's intelligence, motivation, or sensory capabilities. These difficulties typically result from a deficit in phonological components of language that is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities. So as we look at where we are today and where we are going over the next couple of years, let's just kind of look at what's happened in the past year and a half. In 2018, in late spring, there was the passage of this law. And in 2018, we convened the Dyslexia Advisory Council. As many of you have probably heard me say, we had over 150 applications for this council of about 30 to 40 people. Over the course of the school year 2018-19, the Dyslexia Advisory Council met, and we decided on a definition of an academic screener, and we released the request for qualification and quotation, which was an open bid process done through our Department of Enterprise Services through the state of Washington, because we really wanted to say to everybody, please send us the best of what you've got so we can evaluate at the highest level to choose this first round of recommended literacy screening tools. In the summer, as part of the law requires, Superintendent Reichdahl approved the recommended screening tools, and we released them ahead of the expectation of the law in August of 2019. For this upcoming year, the Dyslexia Advisory Council is going to be developing implementation supports, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those in a second. And then the expectation of the statute is that there will be full implementation by all school districts with students in grades K through 2 to be implementing the literacy screening tools and multi-tiered systems of support. So as we said, so what are these expectations of the Washington School District? So starting in school year 21-22, that is the expectation of full implementation. Some of you might have already started or are planning to start next year. That is great. We're just letting everybody know they have time to get acclimated to this new law and expectation. We are expecting that every student will be go through a literacy screening tool looking at phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, letter sound knowledge that show indication of areas of areas of weakness associated with dyslexia. We are also expecting all districts and schools to also implement the use of multi-tiered systems of support in grades K through 2, and to notify parents and families of their screening results, keeping that home school connection as strong as possible, and to regularly update parents and families of a student's literacy development. So to really make sure that we are looking at how our students are doing and we're communicating with all of the people who are working with our student and ensuring the best for them. So what are the skills to be assessed? Phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, rapid automatized naming of skills, and letter sound knowledge. These are the 4 skills that were called out in the law, and this is what the Dyslexia Advisory Council has focused on when selecting the literacy screening tools and what was posted in the request for qualification and quotation. I do want to take a moment and just call out that rapid automatized naming is not the same as letter sound knowledge. Letter sound knowledge is letter sound knowledge. Rapid automatized naming is the opportunity for a student to showcase their memory recall, and we look at colors, numbers, objects that are typically found in a classroom, and letters. It's not about whether or not they know the sound of the letter or know whether or not what a 2 plus 2 looks like. It's whether or not we're really looking at their working memory. So that's why those things were called, those skills were called out in the law. So the role of the Dyslexia Advisory Council over the last year and over the upcoming years is to really advise the superintendent of matters relating to dyslexia In an academic setting, identifying and describing recommended screening tools and resources, and then developing recommendations regarding those pieces in June 2020. And that is specifically called out in the law. The law asked us to first identify the literacy screening tools, and now for this next year to kind of talk about what are the supports. What does this look like? So even as you are going through and doing early adoption or waiting until next year, please know that we have much more resources to be coming forward over the next year or so. And a lot of that will be released next summer, a full year before full implementation. So we're going to be looking at how do you implement a screening system if you don't have one already. What does MTSS look like at grades K through 2? What is the educational information that should be provided to families? And what are we doing to support our students who are in grades 3 and above who aren't going to be screened, but we know will need our support and continue to need our support? So the scope of work that we accomplished in the past year was that we defined what an academic screener was. We really wanted to be calibrated on what this was. An academic screener, it is not an evaluation tool. It is not a diagnostic. It is a quick snapshot of how is this child doing on this day and where do we go to next in our instruction. We, as I mentioned, we posted the request for qualification and quotation. We really did this in hopes of really kind of diminishing the fact that we were getting so many calls from vendors, and we didn't want to feel like we made a decision in isolation. We wanted to be as transparent as possible and to really say, this is what we're looking for. Please show us your resources. We developed a rubric which is posted on our website, and then we also went through the evaluation process. I see a quick question. The first one just came up from Heather about what is the plan for our English language learner students, and that's a great question. We are actually going to be making those recommendations this upcoming year too. We are actually forming a work group today. The Dyslexia Advisory Council is meeting for the first time this year, and one of the work groups is going to be focused on how do we support our English language learners. The guidance that you see on the FAQ on our website came directly from our bilingual department. Of the fact that we really understand that if we're going to be screening students whose language is not, their first language is not English, that probably doing an academic screener of English knowledge is not appropriate. So we're going to be looking at that guidance, and we have people coming from all over the state to be part of that work group and further support those initiatives. So stand by. We'll have some more information for you in about, I want to say about a year. I know that sounds like a long time, but we're working on it. And so this is just a definition of what we did for an academic screener. As I said, it's quick, it's brief, it's reliable. The purpose of assessing how well students are responding to core instruction. And that's really a big piece. As we look at implementing multi-tiered systems of support, the first level of multi-tiered systems of support is core instruction. So we can't really say a child needs a second level of support if they've never been in the core instruction and been with their classmates. So we really want to keep that in mind. And this is a learning for all of us as we move forward. The other piece of this academic screener is that they're helpful in determining the need for future testing. They're quick to administer, score, and interpret, and appropriate for large numbers of persons. We are talking for grades K through 2 in Washington State, over 250,000 students. So we really needed to choose a tool that was going to be quick and helpful. I also want to take a moment to say that every child going through a screener is not being diagnosed for or with dyslexia. It is a screener for their literacy skills. If a child is still struggling after going through an academic screener and multi-tiered systems of support, it should be their gen ed teacher along with their families and their school support team deciding together what should be the next steps. Nobody should be saying to a child who did score low on phonemic awareness or phonological awareness, I think this child has dyslexia. What they should be saying is that we're seeing some weaknesses in their literacy development. Here's what the intervention we're going to try now is. This is a recursive process. No child is the same. What one intervention might work for me might be completely different for another child. And so that's why we say this needs to be looked at for each individual child. There is no way for us as a council, as an agency to say, here's the rule of thumb for all 250,000 K2 students. But we're saying, here's the good guidance we can say. we do a screener, we look at the data, we interpret the results, we work with our school support team, we inform our parents, and we provide an intervention for a child. And then we do that process all over again. And sometimes that child will do great and won't need that further intervention. Sometimes a different intervention may be necessary, and maybe it will warrant further testing and moving on to evaluations and diagnostic assessments that may say that there is a learning disability. But always keeping in mind that this is a recursive process, and it's a process that does take time. So I'm going to just skip this slide. I was feeling very excited about the RFQQ, but we're going to skip that one. More details on the website about that.
You're welcome, everyone.
And I'm going to also, I did want to just call out the rubric for evaluation, because we did put this on our website for districts who are possibly thinking of not going with the recommended literacy screening tools, which is completely okay. And even the law calls out that districts may choose a different tool as long as they're thinking about best practices. These are the best practices that we as a council decided we wanted to look at the global view. We wanted to make sure that the tools aligned to the skills required by law, that there was high quality of the assessment. We wanted to make sure that there was bias and sensitivity, that no one group of students was going to be adversely impacted or have negative outcomes because of being participating in this assessment. We had validity and reliability. We had a correlation to our Washington state standards. We also said, what is your capacity to support the Washington districts? Are you a team publisher that only has 3 people? We're talking 250,000 children over the course of a very large state. Also, we wanted to know what were the vendor qualifications and experiences, and what was the cost. Cost did not play a decision in any of the choices we made, but we felt it was important to know what it was going to cost a district so we could be very transparent about that with you, our districts. Oh, something happened. I don't know. We got something happened here. We're not sure what happened here, people. I apologize. So, best practices.
It just is covering.
Sorry. We've got a slide that's covering. So I'm just going to talk about best practices. So I already talked about what we're going to do for this upcoming year. So I'm going to skip that, and which is perfect. Okay. And so I'm going to just pause there. Should we pause and look at the chat box and see if there's any other questions? Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you guys. And now I'm going to pass the baton to Molly, who is one of the council members and also coming to us from her lens of higher education.
Hello, everyone. I should start off by saying Nasue promoted me to faculty, but I am not yet faculty at the University of Washington.
We want you to be.
So let me clarify.
I almost put that in. I was like professor and director, but...
So I was on the advisory council last year, and it was a really important group of people that came together. Not important in who they were, but important in the effort that we were all partaking in together. And we came to it both initially to really understand the law and what was being asked of us each sort of quarter of the year, and then in total. And this is a 2-year advisory council appointment, and there were deliverables all along the way. And so it was really important first that we all had sort of an aligned and shared understanding of what the law was asking us to do specifically, and what we weren't there to do, because we could be very easily distracted by the many needs that exist around dyslexia and students with dyslexia. And so there was initially some just alignment work that we did to make sure we really were focused on the tasks at hand so that we could meet the deliverables in a high quality way. That also included really spending a lot of time with the rubric that Aira referenced, which outlined how we would assess the proposals from anyone putting forth a proposal to be a screener for dyslexia for the state of Washington. And this meant aligning first on the specific literacy skills within the screener that were being asked about. So phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, phonics, and RAN. And then also not only sort of having deep knowledge and expertise because not everyone there is a literacy person or a dyslexia person, but that we all had shared understanding and definitions of those aspects of the assessment. And then also further aspects around validity, reliability, anti-bias sensitivity. So all of these things that Aira is mentioning, we actually delved into quite deeply just to ensure that we both understood them and had an aligned view on those, so that when we were given proposals, which came to us, we were blind reviewers of the proposals, we could use that rubric and assess the proposal from a shared or aligned perspective, which is exactly what we did. And I would say that was the majority of our time together as a council, was really selecting the right screeners, or the screeners that met the rubric and the outlined standards and best practices that the state was looking for. So we spent a good amount of time doing that, and we then came up with I think initially 2 to 4, and then
we had 2, and then we had 3 that on the last day were tentatively approved, and we asked for more information from the vendors, and we went through an exhaustive process of looking at the at their systems and doing all of those pieces, and then we did an online voting based on that.
And we had so we had then we had an off a not in person set of sort of review criteria that existed at the very end to ensure that anything that was put out by the state was okayed by the council and meeting all the needs. I would also add, at the same time, we had a number of public meetings where we heard directly from the state and from community members about concerns and pressures and issues and needs. And we did take a fair amount of time as a committee to think about how we could best address some of those concerns while they weren't the charge of the council. How do we also ensure that what we're doing becomes public, and that what the public is asking for and expressing as their needs is being heard and represented? And so I think the FAQ that came out from OSPI was really based on some deep sort of discussion within the council on how we make sure that at the public meetings, what people were asking about and concerned about and issues that were arising were being addressed, even if it was to say, this isn't a part of the law and it won't be responded to by OSPI, but here is where you might go for information, or here is when that aspect of this law comes up and when you can expect more information on that specific topic. So our goal was really not only to make sure that we meet the mandate put forward as a council, but also that we ensure we know how important this issue is to so many educators, families, children sitting in the seats in the schools, not feeling great all the time. And so how do we ensure that whatever we put forward is representing all of those constituents, and that we are doing the work of the council well? Let me see, I didn't use a single slide, so.
I think you can skip that one.
Okay.
A sea change.
Oh, so I think this is an important one, and one that I can speak to both in terms of my role in higher ed, but also having been a kindergarten teacher for 7 years in a large urban public school district. I came from I had a college degree and I got a teaching credential, and I went into the classroom to teach kindergarten. And it became apparent to me very quickly that I had not been well prepared to teach reading, much less anybody with reading difficulties or anyone needing any extra kind of intervention or specific instructional approach. I was really reliant on my on the curriculum that I was provided, and it was apparent to me right away that that curriculum wasn't necessarily meeting the needs of all of my students. So that's a conundrum that faces many teachers in our country, not just here in the state of Washington. And oftentimes what happens is teachers go into the classroom to teach and they close their door and they're alone with all their students and all of their students' needs. And this is not new this is not new information to anybody, but it is really important to understand the depth of expertise that's needed to address the varying needs of readers that are sitting in front of you when you're a kindergarten teacher and a first grade and second grade and third grade teacher. And then occasionally, if students are not receiving the kind of instruction they need, the diversity of needs, of literacy needs within that classroom continues to grow as the students move up in grades and become further and further apart from each other in terms of what they know and are able to do. So since I was a teacher in the 90s, I've seen higher ed is really working to be responsive in a number of ways. For instance, they have early literacy coursework and middle school literacy coursework and upper school literacy coursework, so that you're not as a teacher, you're not given one literacy course that's meant to focus on K through 12 literacy instruction for one quarter. So it's getting more intricate and more divided up. There's also competency-based courses so that you can actually illustrate as a teacher how you would do something and see what kind of results it gets, and see if you're implementing the instruction well and getting the kind of results you need. We all know higher education doesn't move as fast as we would like it to, and we aren't there yet with the quality of coursework so that every teacher graduating is an amazing teacher of reading, but that's obviously the direction that we would like to be moving in. Additionally, dyslexia specifically isn't taught in general education teaching credentialing programs for the most part. So it would be really rare that a classroom teacher would understand depths of any aspects of dyslexia unless they did their own reading about it or their own information finding. So I think that I'm going to leave it there, and I will stop and also give people an opportunity to jot any questions in the chat box, but I also want to make sure we save time to hear from an interventionist in the school building.
So going back down, Is there any way we can see the systems that were not recommended and why? Actually, no, we cannot. Because this was a request for qualification and quotation and a formal bid process through the state of Washington, we are legally not allowed to release that information to the public or their scoring. I would say on the whole, a lot of our the tools that weren't chosen, it has nothing, it's not a condemnation of them being a poor tool. They just did not meet the needs and the expectations at that time of on the rubric of what our Dyslexia Advisory Council will meet. I did debrief with almost every single publisher that was not recommended, and overwhelmingly from the feedback and from what I remember saying to them, one of the things that we really pushed hard on was the bias and sensitivity. Did this screening have low negative or false positives or negative results if it was a child, if it was a Black, African American, Hispanic, Latinx, Native American student? Did it have negative scoring if it was an English language learner? All of those pieces, and our council, which I'm really proud of, really pushed back and said, some of these tools are okay and are good, but it's showing that the norming group was only done with predominantly white upper middle class students, and that's not who our state is. So really taking into consideration, what does it mean to put forth a tool where how can we as a council that's here for the state, how can we as an agency support a tool that may not have positive outcomes from every child who sits for it. And interesting enough, right after we actually published the tools, I got 2 back-to-back emails, one from a parent asking, how did you ensure that there was cultural competency and equity in choosing these tools? And I was able to respond to her and say, we did all X, Y, and Z, and this is what we asked for. And then I heard from a school district asking, what was your equity lens to make sure that all of our children can be successful in this screening piece? So I think it was really good feedback for our publishers to understand that we're taking this very seriously in Washington. And I think for those, when we get our cycle up, I think we'll see a much more bigger focus on that to this next round of reviewing. I was sitting with one of our publishers who did do it, and they said that hearing that feedback, that one of the publishers that was recommended really appreciated that feedback because it was something they as a company had really thought was really important, and their statisticians and psychometric people had really done a really beautiful job, but not very many people had ever really called that out as something that was important. So it's a push from the community to say, we want to make sure the tools that we're putting in front of our students are good for every child, not just some of them.
Molly, any last thoughts?
No, I think I covered what I wanted to, and if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer.
All right. You'll be hearing now from Liz Coon. She is an intervention elementary teacher in the Seattle Public Schools. Liz, and you can just use there.
Okay. Hi, I am a former, and maybe I will be again, classroom teacher who jumped at the chance to try something different and applied for the intervention position. Seattle's starting to have more and more intervention positions. And right away, found myself sitting in front of these students who Molly was talking about, students who weren't progressing with Tier 1 core instruction. And it took me maybe a week or two to realize that I hadn't been adequately trained to work with these students. And so I started pursuing my own knowledge about reading, and the types of deficits that my students were having all wound up pointing to dyslexia. And so I started reading books about dyslexia. I called local colleges and universities asking for classes. Actually couldn't find a local class and wound up taking an online course through the University of London, which was excellent. That was through the International Dyslexia Association. And through all of that, began to understand how poor my training had been, and started trying to implement some of what I had learned with these students. And then what I ran into was a lack of resources, certainly in my school building, and then even in the district level. And so I started buying my own resources and using them. And I'm currently doing what I would call Tier 2 and Tier 3 instruction using systematic, code-based, sequential instruction. I'm using the Wilson program is what I purchased. It seemed the easiest to implement and relatively affordable. And I'm having terrific results. I'm looking at the screen right now, and that 40 to 50% of students who need code-based, explicit, systematic instruction are responding really, really well to my instruction with the Wilson program. And then that bottom 10 to 15%, what I'm finding is they're also progressing. And I can see, I was saying earlier, we were chatting about students who are struggling to read by about the middle, sometimes the beginning of second grade. You see them just kind of slumping. Any classroom teachers out there, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Dreading reading, starting to come up with all kinds of ways to hide their struggle, whether it's behavioral or memorizing or whatnot, those kids who've come to me, they are progressing. It's taking them longer than the other kids, but they sit up a little straighter. A lot of them seem really eager to come and see me. And so I'm really encouraged by that. And I was overjoyed when I heard that the state was going to start implementing screening for all students, because I think that what we have currently is what is called by some the wait to fail model, where we are waiting. And this is the advice I used to give to parents, and I just cringe thinking of how many times I said this in conferences. Let's just give them a little more time. Some kids are late bloomers, and some kids are, but there's no reason to not intervene early. And if it turns out the student doesn't need that much intervention, you can always pull it back. But waiting until they are hanging their heads or hiding under the table in second grade, and then finally having a special education evaluation, which is going to take, 6 months before all that gets rolling. And then finally they start some special education in third grade. That's too long to wait. And so I'm excited about the work being done in the state. I was so excited that I didn't want to wait until 21, 22 and started working with our school psychologist last year to come up with our own screener. And so I put together what I'm just calling an informal screener. It's only for my own use, helping me identify students in our building. And so I came up with a rapid automatized naming screener just using colors. And I screened all of the kindergartners and first graders. Just finished Friday, actually. Really helpful information from that. I just used colors, which was successful. The students who couldn't do that, I had 4 English language learners. Interestingly, they all wanted to try it. And so I let them try it, but with a big, flag on their results. We were calling it the color race. And so they all thought that they didn't want to miss out on that. And then of course we have the letter sound screener, which probably everyone's doing in kindergarten and first grade. And now the students who came out at the bottom 20% of the RAN, I am now starting a phonemic awareness screener with. And then we'll go from there about starting some intervention. And our school is working on, I'm also the MTSS lead at our school, and we're working hard this year on providing improved Tier 2 instruction in the classroom. And teachers are really getting behind that. But they're also looking for and waiting for what kind of support are they going to have in doing that. So that's where we are at my school.
And I would just say, this is Aira. I love hearing that story because I think it talks about how we all, how this law, though there are recommended literacy screening tools, that the law very much recognizes the local control of our state. And it also recognizes the idea that everybody's going to do it differently and how to meet their community and the educators that they have. So I really appreciate Liz's taking us through that story, because it exactly talks about, what does this look like? How do we start early? What does this look like? How am I working with my colleagues to do it? It's not just in isolation. So I did one screener, and so I looked at that percent, and now I'm going to look at a different screener so I get a wealth of information about the students that I'm in. And I think that's what we're really asking at the heart of all of this, is to be more informed practitioners and to be more thoughtful about the interventions that we provide to our students. Because as Liz was talking about the wait to fail, I think my stomach did a whole kind of churn, because I taught first grade, and I am sure I said that more than once and just simultaneously was cringing right there with you, because we've all been there. And, and part of it is just, changing our practice. And if I could go back and talk to me as a teacher, it would be different. And if I ever went back to the classroom, I'd have a very different response to that. And that's part of this piece, is that we're all growing and we're shifting our practices and becoming better. So I'm going to stop right here. And it is a question of, is there a time frame for additional system reevaluation? Hold on. Will more possibly be added prior to implementation? Yes. So that's a great question. The question is, are we going to be adding more recommended screeners? That's another work group that the Dyslexia Advisory Council is going to be working on, is what is the time frame and cycle for review of the next set of screeners. So we will have that process, and I'm kind of leaning on them a little harder to try to have some initial guidance out in January, because we're getting those conversations from our vendors and also from our districts. Also remembering, you do not have to choose one of the recommended screeners. You can go and choose something that meets the expectations of the law, and you can do that on your own. So we're really honoring the local control of that piece around that. We did have 2 other slides. Implementation, the hard work. I think this is a big thing, and this is something we're going to be working on, but really remembering that the screening is the easy part. It's what we do afterwards. The remediation, the support, the intervention is really what we have to think about that. But we can't decide on what the intervention is if we haven't looked at the data. So we really need to kind of have a plan. And for some schools, this is going to mean changing their schedule, changing how they operate. There needs to be shared time to look at that data to decide on what next. So really coming up with a plan of what does this look like? What would you like to see 5 years from now if you walked through this school and saw this implemented well? How does it happen? It won't just happen by us hoping. It comes together with a plan. And I'm not sure if I had one or out. And okay. Again, the MTSS, I think this is a piece is that it's a cyclical process. It's not just one piece of it at all. Our educators need to have an opportunity to learn. We need to have our administrators on board to understand that the system might need to be shifted so that we have that time for PLCs and for educators to look at data and to talk and to support one another on those pieces. We need to look at instruction, and we need to look at the supports and resources, and knowing that we have this a couple of years. No one is going to do this perfectly out of the gate. We know within implementation research, there's actually a dip the first couple of years as people get better, but not giving up because things didn't go well the first year is probably the worst thing you can do, but persevering and kind of going through this step by step is what will get us to the other side. And again, this is the cycle I was just talking about: educator administrator knowledge, assessing student knowledge, reviewing assessment results, refining and shifting instruction, communicating with parents and families, and reviewing student progress over and over and over again. It's the whole process. We don't stop looking at our students' progress, we don't do it once. And I think that's the other piece is, don't just wait. You observe things all the time. As teachers, we take in a million different things in one moment by looking at that. So don't forget about that formative assessment. What are you observing with a student? Liz talked about, the student who's under the table or who's feeling not confident. That is formative assessment. That is data. That is information where we know something may not be going right. So think about all the ways in which you can look at how a student is doing.
Question from Jeff: are there any specifics of when students have been screened during the year? Example, kinders possibly in December or January.
Yes, on the recommended literacy screening tools, we have the grade level band matrix that talks about the calendar of when we recommend. And for kindergarten, we're asking that we're asking for to do the WA Kids, the Teaching Strategies Gold, or WA Kids in the fall, and then to commence the phonemic awareness and phonological awareness and letter sound knowledge in January to be able to do that. I really want to push that of the pieces is that a 5-year-old coming into school, if you are going to screen them, I'm pretty sure a lot of them are going to need intervention because it's September and they're 5 and doing that. So I'm going to say maybe waiting a couple of months for that core instruction to kind of saturate, to marinate would be a really good time to do that piece.
Well, and the WA Kids does have that phonemic awareness assessment. And so then you can use that information to sort of decide who you might begin with in January.
Perfect example. That's perfect. And, we did this in consultation with our early learning director, and we have aligned and we've called out on the actual matrix what pieces of the WA Kids can inform that. So it's not as if you're waiting, you're just looking at the data in a different way. It's not just that one piece. Dibbles, I'm wondering if it will be with a shift to Acadian. So we reviewed, the proposals. I honestly don't remember all the proposals. I know that we did approve Dibbles 8 out of the University of Oregon. I know that Acadians is a different platform to do that. I have not reviewed either one of them, so I can't say if Acadians is going to be on the recommended list. That is a decision by the Dyslexia Advisory Council. And if we do another release of an RFQQ, we absolutely hope that Acadians will submit their proposal for the council members to evaluate and review. But at this time right now, we are recommending the University of Oregon Dibbles 8. That's what the council is standing by at this moment. Can part of this screener replace portions of the current WA Kids assessment in order to prevent over-assessing students? No, I'm sorry, unfortunately not. WA Kids is a state requirement, and that's why we're saying WA Kids in the fall and screening of academic skills in January and December. We really believe in our WA Kids observational assessment and the details that it provides. So we're really going to hang our hat on that being the first initial information to give to our kindergarten students. And if you have a transitional kindergarten, to also have that information. Also remembering that a screener is going to be short. The screener in January, December is not going to be the same as an observational assessment that you did in the fall. It's going to be much briefer and to the point of that. So I would just say really thinking about how your school support team is going to implement that and what that looks like, and how do you use all of the data from WA Kids, from formative assessment, from observation throughout the fall to inform where to start in January.
So folks, we have started the Q&A portion of this webinar. So if you have any questions, comments for Aira, Molly, or Liz, please use our chat for that. A couple of things is you're going to write some things into the chat just to be convenient with our time. There are a couple of WERA opportunities I just want to plug for you as we're wrapping up this webinar. We have the WERA Winter Conference coming up in December. It will be the second week in December. Registration is open now. And we have an awesome keynote. Dr. Beverly Tatum will be the keynote for that conference. And she has published many a book, some that have been republished recently that are just pretty cool. So she is someone you don't want to miss. We are also, we have some board of director openings, and we are eliciting nominations for the election cycle. So if you are interested in becoming a board member, please look to our website for information about that. And then lastly, we are always open to new topics for this webinar series. So if you have something that you either want to hear about more, or something that you want to showcase or discuss, as we are doing today, that are things that are, up and coming for the field, things that we need to know about in Washington State, please send me an email with that information. And we are not quite done. We've got some comments here, but I do want to put up the presenters' emails so that you can get them down now. We will make sure to send this PowerPoint out to you as well. So another question here. Where do we find the list of recommended screeners?
Can I leave your screen?
Yes.
Okay, so
you're savvy.
Okay, I don't know if I am. Okay, hold on. We're going to drive and try to get to the World Wide Web, the interwebs, to do that. What is this open on? Okay, hold on. I'm going to go to the screen. Don't look at any Nasue screen. Okay. All right. Here we go. So OSPI. So I know we have a new website, so everybody please be patient. I'm actually going to do this with our council members too, so completely understand. So student success resource by subject. And then we go down to English language arts. And then we scroll to the bottom and we see understanding dyslexia. And here we have the information from where we are, dyslexia council members, dyslexia advisory council, the recommended literacy screening tools. And here it is. And here's all the information about where we are right now. And as we said, here's the literacy screening tools PDF. These are the screeners that we have the Dyslexia Advisory Council has recommended. We also have here, I'm just going to show the grade band matrix, timeline matrix that we were just referencing before of here's kindergarten. And so here we say, make the note, please look at gold objectives and dimensions for alignment in literacy and language. So these are the recommended grade band literacy screening timeline matrix. Will these stay the same over the next 2 years? Probably not, but this is what we've recommended thus far for our earlier adopters, and we'll be evaluating this. I would think that everything aside from the emergency WAC and the recommended tools, that all of these are living documents. We're constantly adding to the FAQ. We're constantly taking in information to think about how should we recommend different timing and assessments for our students. So it's a living resource, but not to the point that we're changing every day, that we're changing thoughtfully as possible. Let me see. What is the state providing for funding professional development for screening and next steps? That's a great question. So, Office of Superintendent, don't worry, I know I get the looks all the time. So this has been a very quiet process. So, as always, money doesn't grow on trees. So over the past, it doesn't. I'm so sorry. I know, I'm sorry. Is that over the summer, we quietly worked really hard, my office and the fiscal office, to put forth a decision plan asking for funding to do professional development and to get that forward. The proposal went through as a decision package. I want to say about 3 months ago. No, it's not 3 months ago. I'm sorry. 2 weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, it went forward. So we have put in a request to the governor and to the legislature saying we really want funding to be able to do an online PD about understanding dyslexia, and also what are the emergent reading skills that are necessary to support our students. So we have put in that request. That doesn't mean it's going to be honored, but we really, we didn't want to say anything until it went forward. So we have put our kind of stake in the sand of saying this we really believe, and we think professional learning is important. The next question is, will we get the funding to be able to support this, or else I'm about to become a really good grant writer. So we're working on that. We'll know during the legislative session if it's there. Maybe Nasue, when she sends out the slide deck and everything, can also send you the link to the OFM decision package, where you can see that we're asking for money to purchase screeners. We're asking for funding to put together PD, and we're asking for funding to support our literacy coordinators around the ESD. So everybody has someone in their region that can help support with this implementation and scaling up educator knowledge around foundational and emergent reading skills to be able to do that. So I hope that answers your question. We believe it. We want to get PD. We just need the money. I think that is the last question. Anything else? Final thoughts?
We all at this table feel strongly that bringing dyslexia into the schools and using the term and learning more about it and ensuring that there are ways that we are addressing the community and the children who are struggling with reading and is just such a critical and overdue part of education. And so for me, I feel inspired to be a part of the team and to really work on behalf of all the kids who and families who, you know, are struggling with this right now and to come.
I think it is. And I think, Molly, you make a really good point, which always gives me, because it is October is Dyslexia Awareness Month. I just always like to remind everybody that you can say the word dyslexia. It is not a bad word, and that you can talk about it and you can put it in IEPs. And that brings me to our dear colleague letter from the fall of 2015, written. It's multiple pages long. It's about 4 pages long, but it was written by, our assistant. Was it written by, it was written by the special ed director to talk about stop thinking that you can't say it. Stop thinking that you have to dance around this. And so we reference this letter at least 4 times a year, just to remind everybody that this is not a dirty word. We want to say it to give it power and to make sure our students get those resources. And we post, and here's a Dear Colleague letter that really talks about why it should be used and why it should be referenced and why it can be talked about at IEP meetings and actually put in an IEP.
Well,
so,
and we know what to do for these kids.
Right, and we know what to do.
Just need to do it.
Let me see. Okay, we have received on how long LAP funds can be used to support PD screener purchases and implementation. Can you clarify? So the Learning Assistance Program and my office works. We have an emergency WAC going forward, and I'm actually going to go straight to the language of that emergency WAC to make sure that I am giving you the right information. If there has been conflicting information, I would definitely recommend that you reach out to us. Hold on, where is it? Resources. Funding guidelines to be able to do this. The WAC is very clear. That we are providing, you can use your LAP, Learning Assistance Program funds for the purchase of the recommended literacy screeners. Early implementation that choose to implement the screening law may use their district's Learning Assistance Program funds, their base allocation under this WAC. You can use PD. We will support the purchase of the PD that goes around with using the literacy screening tool, but right now we are not supporting if you want to bring in a speaker or to send a whole group of your educators to a conference. LAP funds cannot be used for that kind of PD. We are also not supporting LAP funds at this supporting the use of LAP funds to do a peer review or to do a selection of materials at this time. We're being really clear at this moment. It's for purchase. It's for the professional learning to use the tools. And also if you need to purchase a specific intervention program, like Liz mentioned one, that will so to support students in kinder through 2nd grade who show indications of that. I think more than anything in the reporting, the question will be when we go through the reporting together collaboratively is that if we see that there was, that if you purchase 1 or 2 kits for an intervention, completely all of those pieces. I'm actually giving you guidelines on how you can do that. But if we see that there was a purchase of a district-wide system and it was for every K2 classroom teacher, we're gonna wonder, what is that, an intervention or is that a tier 1 instruction shift? And we're not supporting the purchase of curriculum materials. We're supporting the purchase of intervention materials for a small group of students. And this will continue to grow. And as I said, it will continue. At this moment, this is an emergency WAC and it's in place until mid-December. The permanent WAC will go into place. And that will give you an opportunity as we learn and grow and think about what are the needs that our stakeholders need to be able to move forward. And that's why we also put in a separate request for actually the purchase of materials. So it opens it up a little bit more and we can become a pass-through to districts to provide them with funding. But that's not here yet. The legislature has to vote on that.
Yeah. All right, our time is up. Really quickly, a reminder of how you can stay connected to the Dyslexia Council's work. Aira showed you the website. They do post their meetings, and the public is welcome to attend those meetings. They happen every quarter.
We have some public meetings and we have some executive session meetings. So those are always needed. So there is a public meeting this evening, which the public is welcome to attend, starting at 5:30 here at ESD 113.
In Olympia?
In Olympia, Tumwater. In Tumwater. But the first part of the day is an executive session where it's not open to the public. So we have those coming intermittently throughout the year.
And is there a listserv people can?
If you go to the page that I just showed you, you can log in and get a Gov delivery. And we send out announcements fairly regularly, almost monthly.
Okay. And of course, you are always welcome to contact Liz, Molly, or Aira. Thank you very much for your time, panelists, and thank you very much to the audience on on the other side of GoToWebinar. That is
Thank
it for Hot
you.
Topics. Have a
Thank
good rest of your
you.
day.
Thank you.